Hello, everyone. I'm Ben's AI avatar, Leah, and welcome to AI Insights, the Executive Brief. In today's episode, Ben Bohman himself sits down with Patricia Moore, Senior Manager of Innovation Programs at Boomi.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is sort of the strength I think I brought into this job. So when I first started, I spent the first few months just learning our platform. So Boomi is a low-code integration and automation platform. So I learned to build and sort of became a Boomi developer, a power user of our platform. And then I was able to take that knowledge, understanding the technical side, and then sort of bridge it to create more solutions. Well, not really solutions, but create the verbiage around our solutions that would speak to the business end user.
With an impressive background spanning academia, small business, and nonprofit work, Patricia brings unique perspectives on data connectivity and AI solutions.
And I think the average person, when you say AI to them, they sort of think of it as like this magical black box. And like they don't understand that it is artificial intelligence. It has been trained on something the same way you would train the human brain on something. And so that is something that I've like been really challenged to balance is like stay ahead, stay up to date in the conversations at work.
Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI Insights to the Executive Brief. Today, I am with Patricia Moore, who is, and I'm going to make sure because I already am messing it up, Senior Manager, Innovation Programs at Boomi. So to do a more formal introduction, go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
You nailed it. I am currently the Senior Manager of Innovation Programs at Boomi. I've been there for about 3 years. The entire time I've been on the Solutions and Innovations team, now known as Boomi Innovation Group. But prior to that, I used to teach at Virginia Commonwealth University in their product innovation program. So I taught the capstone for their master's program.
Nice.
And before that, I sort of have worked all over the place. This is actually my first job in tech. So I've been a small business owner. I've had a nonprofit and a for-profit. I've worked in nonprofit in leadership development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I started my career in the music industry. So I started my career in concerts and live music. I've worked in food and beverage, worked in hospitality. So I sort of bring a lot of different perspectives into my job now working at Boomi, which is all about connectivity, connecting your data, cleansing your data. And all of that is super important when we're talking about artificial intelligence and using AI solutions. So that is where I sit today.
Yeah, that's exciting. I love that diversity and background because I think it is important. I think sometimes when we look through things through a certain lens, right, it can be narrow, and the wider our lens gets, the more we can adapt. Now, something interesting I also find with you is you're now into this technology side, but you've always, when I look at your background, you have this business and the strategic side. Like it seems like you've always been looking at strategy in some sense or another. And then there is some psychology with it. I can tell there's got to be some ways that you look at psychology with it. But where are you seeing this now, this integration with yourself with business strategy and technology? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is sort of the strength I think I brought into this job. So when I first started, I spent the first few months just learning our platform. So Boomi is a low-code integration and automation platform. So I learned to build and sort of became a Boomi developer, a power user of our platform. And then I was able to take that knowledge, understanding the technical side, and then sort of bridge it to create more solutions. Well, not really solutions, but create the verbiage around our solutions that would speak to the business end user. So I feel like a lot of tech companies have this problem. They can articulate what they do to a technical developer. They have a very hard problem articulating to a business user or a C-suite person what the value of their product is. So how does it impact the business? What is the value proposition of what it is that you're doing? And so that is sort of the skill that I am bringing when I'm working with these AI solutions, is sort of thinking about, okay, this is how the technology works, but this is how it impacts the business. And this is why it should be important to leadership and not just to the folks who are actually doing the work.
Yeah, I think I talk about this a lot actually, which is interesting because I talk about the EQ, right? This emotional intelligence. And in the tech world, there's obviously a very high IQ, amount of IQ in the tech world. but it doesn't always equate to being able to translate or to discuss what you, especially in technology, how does this apply to business? How does this apply to your strategy? And I always think that when you're having these conversations in tech, that you actually need to start with the business, and you need to start with what are they trying to accomplish? And exactly the point you're making, it's so spot on, because most tech companies want to sit there and talk about their product and what their product does. And every product, except for maybe a few, does similar things to maybe 5 or 10 other products out there. So if you're not understanding the business, then you're really not understanding where it is. Another thing I laugh at is the value prop, right? And everyone's like, what's your value prop? And I'm like, well, you really don't know your value prop until you've talked to a customer for 15 to 30 minutes. And then you know how your value prop fits. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, when I'm talking to our sales team and thinking about enablement around a lot of our solutions, I try to get them to have the customer focus on their pain points instead of the end points. So the idea is that a lot of our customers come to us and they're like, we want to connect NetSuite to Shopify. Like they want to talk in endpoints. And that's great. We can do that. But before we get into that, let's talk about what your pain points are. Like, why are you here? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then we can back into, okay, what kind of data is that? And where does that data live? And what does it need to look like? Where does it need to go? But I think we have to start with, what is the actual problem we're trying to solve? Because the customer might come to us thinking they solve it this way, and we could do that. But there might be a more optimal way to solve that problem that would maybe solve some other problems as well, which is why we want to first look at pain points.
Yeah, absolutely love it. So now, speaking of what is that problem that we try to solve, so Boomi obviously has set out to solve a problem. I think you guys and Boomi have a unique platform. What is the problem that Boomi first set out to solve? Has that evolved at all, or are you solving that problem now? Other ones that you found, or what does that look like?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I've only been at Boomi for 3 years, but I think the history lesson that I have been taught is that EDI was originally the problem that we were trying to solve. So electronic data interchange, for anybody that works in an industry where you're doing sort of like processing orders. I think Walmart might be a great example of this, right? Like when you're thinking about logistics and all the information that comes with that. You're talking about EDI. It's like a very specific format. And so moving those files in between different systems was sort of where we started. And then we sort of evolved. So it's not just EDI interchange. Now we're looking at all sorts of different file formats when you're talking about moving data, but we're not just moving data. So in addition to moving data, we're also helping companies master their data. So thinking about, you have data that lives in a ton of different systems, but they might be all around the same topic. So let's take customers, for instance. So you might have customer information in a loyalty program that's going to tell you like how often they shop, what types of things they are shopping for, or maybe just like what their preferences are, the things that they like, the size that they wear. But then you also have like a different system that's going to have their actual orders. So what are the things that they order? When did they order them? How many? What address did they send them to? But the address they sent them to might not be their actual house address. So let's say you have a different system that holds your customer data. That data has like your email address, your phone number, whatever it is, right? Like your contact information, your social media handles. So depending on how you get that information from your customers, that information might not always match. People move, right? People get new cell phones. People change their handles. They get off social media. They change their last name. Like all of these things happen. And so what we like to try to help our customers do is not just connect their data, but really master their data and say, these are our golden records. This is our source of truth for the most up-to-date information pulling from all of our systems. And they can have control over which system is the source of truth for that specific piece of information. And you can automate pushing that information to the other systems if you would like. So that's just one example of another thing that we do. We also do API management. If you wanted to extend that information to other people or businesses outside of your business or other departments, there's lots of stuff that we're into, but the underpinning of it is we're helping you manage your data.
I love, especially diving into the AI world. I think a big conversation I have right now is on AI readiness. Are you even ready for an AI implementation? And data readiness, data cleanliness, data governance, data management, all these things that you're talking about for optimizing data, I think is so crucial, because if you look at a business that might want to implement AI, do you want to segment and like separate your AI implementation, or do you want an AI that actually is able to discuss and talk and cover your whole entire company? And I think the problem right now is a lot of companies are set up for disparate AI systems, just like they are right now. You mentioned it, I've got a disparate CRM, I've got a disparate accounting system, I've got a separate this, a separate that. But that's not where AI is powerful. AI is powerful if it can talk and read and look at all the data, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the conversation that we are hearing with customers right now is like, they want to be able to harness their data and they want to be able to get the insights. What they don't want is to give access to the data, which is paramount. If you don't have access to it, then you can't utilize it. And so it's sort of like this catch-22, because if you wanted to really think about this in a secure way, when you think about these generic LLMs that are accessible by the public, so ChatGPT is probably like the number one example that everyone understands. If you were to put information into ChatGPT right now without a paid license, you are helping train their model. If you pay for a license, you are signing an agreement that says at some point, I think maybe the enterprise license, that you're not training their model, that data is staying secure. However, if you are a company that works in finance, like a fintech company, if you are healthcare or pharma, you're under really strict regulations. And even if the contract says that, I don't know that the trust is necessarily there. Yeah. So these companies are looking at, okay, well, how could we build and train our own models, which is a much lengthier process and a much more expensive process. It takes a lot of different types of resources. And so what we're trying to do now is have this orchestration conversation, which is about how you can leverage more vanilla models and infuse your information, but only the information you need. You don't need to train a model on all of the things, right? Like you might not just need specific pieces of information that are not proprietary or personally identifiable, right? A lot of people talk about PII. You can use some of these vanilla models with the right orchestration to feed it with context that is specific to your business without giving it all of your information. And I think that is something that we've been talking about a lot that companies are really interested in because it's sort of like meeting them halfway.
Yep, exactly. And I go into my cybersecurity background and there's this thing called shadow IT, right? So it's these programs that are running in the background that shouldn't be running in the background and they're opening up huge security holes and you call that shadow IT, right? Now you have the shadow AI, which is that same concept and it's exactly what you're talking about. And it's a good thought that if you don't provide your employees with AI to make them more efficient, and then you secure that AI, like how you're discussing, your employees are going to go get their own. And now there's things you can block, but there's always ways around it. So I'm a huge proponent of let's provide the employees with a secure AI environment to work on, because if not, again, they're going to go get their own. And it reminds me when I first started in sales and the CRMs were just starting out. And I know this is way before your time, but what we would do is the CRMs were clunky. They were kludgy. And so what we would do is we would just download and we'd manage an Excel spreadsheet. And well, if you don't have control over that, and now I have all my Excel spreadsheet with all my customer, and I mean, I wasn't in healthcare, but you have PII and CP&IA and all this information in there. Now that's a risk because that environment at that time wasn't secure. Now there's regulations and they're watching, are you downloading customer lists? How are you exporting them? Now Excel can still be used, but there's this risk. And yeah, we're running into the same thing now with AI. If we don't provide what you're talking about, or a business doesn't, human nature is to want to be efficient. And human nature is to go find how to be most efficient. But efficient is first, and unfortunately, security is second, right? So they're going to think security second. Oh, look at did I have balloons go off on here, or was it just on there? My side screen just had balloons, because you know how you have the AI, and I think it was just my side ones. Did it go off on here too?
I didn't see it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just like, I just had balloons. I don't know what the balloon magic is. So anyhow, yeah, now we're all over the place. But yeah, so but yes, we can help secure this AI environment. So aside from the security aspect of it, Boomi is helping, I would assume, with automations, efficiencies, and flows beyond that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really thinking about connecting your data to the right place, but then also what do you want to do with that data? So when we're talking about AI solutions, we think of it as sort of two parts. You have what we call our context pipeline. So that is feeding in the data that is specific to your business that maybe the model wouldn't be trained on. But then there's the action pipeline. So what are you doing with the output of whatever this AI analysis is? Like, that is great. That you have it, but what are you going to do with it? Do you need to feed it into a system? Do you need to get it to a specific person? Are you going to use it to then do some sort of logic that routes some sort of automation to a specific system or to a specific person? There's so many different things that you can do with it. And so I think a lot of the conversation is around not just like surfacing this analysis and this reporting, but being able to act on it. And what we're noticing is, again, the companies want to get to a point where all of these things are automated, but the trust is just not there yet. So they want to have what we call the human in the loop, right? So maybe you get the analysis back, but then it has to surface in some sort of like graphical UI or in some sort of like conversational platform, whether it's like Slack or Teams or whatever it is, so that somebody can verify it before it gets sent to actually automate some sort of task.
Yeah. So human in the loop is an interesting conversation. It seems that and I mentioned psychology. I don't know if that's your degree, but it seems
not,
like
but I talk about it a lot.
Yeah, I can see that on your profile. But so humanities, culturally, psychology, all this stuff. And there's this conversation I always like to have is the human touch, where AI and humanity intersect. And you kind of talked about that human loop. We might be at a time someday where it intersects less. But that being said, I still think I'm a proponent, again, of being of the mindset that AI is going to not replace human jobs, but it's going to repurpose human jobs to something more efficient and different. What's your thoughts on that topic?
I totally agree. I mean, the AI in its current state, I think of it like a high school intern, right? Having interns is helpful. You want them. You can give them the work that you don't want to do. Let's all be honest, right? Like, we're not giving the interns the fun stuff. We're giving the interns the grunt work. And so that's sort of how I think about the AI, is like, it's going to help you get to the destination faster, but you can't give it the most important tasks just yet. You have to be smarter than the AI. You need to be able to check it. Like, you shouldn't be relying on it to know things that you don't know. The idea is it's just trying to get you to the end point faster. And so I don't think it's going to replace human jobs. I think it's just going to change the way our jobs look. I think critical thinking is going to be extremely important as we move into this new era of jobs, because these sort of manual, mindless tasks are going to be passed off to artificial intelligence. And so we're really going to have to like sit and think and be more creative and be more innovative, which to me is exciting. I think that's the fun part of like the brainstorming and the ideation and prototyping, trial and testing things. Like, I'm looking forward to that side of the journey. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had one of my guests, I think it was Scott Stransky. He's the owner of Full Funnel Content, who does content marketing and is starting to, understand and has a great grasp on AI. But he said AI isn't going to replace content marketers. AI is going to replace content marketers who don't adapt and modify themselves to fit into that AI, into this new world we're in. That comment kind of makes sense across the board, not just content marketing, right? Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, outside of my job, I do some writing, and I don't have the AI write for me. So like once a month I put out this, I'm going to call it a blog post, but it's a Substack. So if you're not familiar with Substack, it sort of works kind of like a blog. It's like a blog meets marketing emails, I guess. So it posts somewhere, but then it also like sends it out to an email list. But when I have ideas for what I want to write about, I might interview somebody and I'll take some notes. I will feed those notes into ChatGPT and have it spit out some sort of, let's call it 1,000-word essay.
Sure.
I'm never going to publish that essay.
Right.
The writing is not that good. It doesn't have like personality. It doesn't have good tone. The grammar is almost there. But I use it as like a starting point. I'm like, oh, it's interesting that this is what it picked up on as being the most important of the things that I wrote down. I might not have thought of it that way. It sort of gives me an idea of like structure. And sometimes it shows me the things I don't want to say. I'm like, okay, I need to not emphasize that point. But it actually does make the writing process so much faster, because I could sit and think through, how do I want to outline this? But that's time intensive. And so again, it's just sort of like helping me get to get to the outcomes quicker than I would have on my own.
Absolutely. AI writing is, it's such a trip to me because, and I do a fair amount of AI writing, and man, it just, you have to, like you said, you have to verify and then you have to rewrite and go over the top. But even things like, the Oxford comma, like I'll be like, don't use Oxford comma. And then there'll be 18 Oxford commas in there. And I'll be like, do you remember I told you not to use Oxford commas? So we're like, I'm sorry, let me rewrite it. And then there's still 5. And then I'll be like, do you know what an Oxford comma is? And it'll tell me, yeah, I know. And then it'll explain. I said, well, it's funny you say that because there were still 5 in there. And then there'll be 2, it's just, it's
that
what
high
it is.
School intern behavior.
Exactly. Yeah, it really is. It's so funny you say that because yesterday I was trying to create a PowerPoint using AI. And I use GPT and I've created hundreds of PowerPoints with it. And it literally told me I can't create a PowerPoint. And I said, okay, well, yesterday you created one. Why can't you do one now? And it said, oh, you're right. I apologize. It's almost like a high school intern that was just lazy and was like, yeah, not in the mood.
Not feeling it today.
Yeah, I don't want to do it. Oh my gosh, it's kind of fun to play with, and some of the stuff I see with it. When you say high school intern, it just makes me laugh because it's so moody and active, and I have to try to remember, like, hey, be nice because someday, we need to be nice
just
to
in
it.
Case, yeah, just
exactly,
in case,
just in case. I want to be on that right side. But so now, how are you liking, your transition into technology? Like you said, technology wasn't something you did right at the beginning. Are you enjoying it? And you're enjoying I guess you call the psychology, the mix of, because you're not just doing technology, but the mix of strategy and technology. How are you liking it?
It is everything I always said I wanted. And I think I'm just having a hard time adjusting. So like the work is getting done and I really enjoy my job, but I've always said I always want a job that challenges me. You know this, the thing about tech is it's always challenging you. So like when I first started in this job, I was like, oh my gosh, I am drinking from the fire hose every day. It's an overload of information. Everything is always changing. I'm like, I just need to sort of like find my flow. I mean, I'm 3 years in. I think I have found a flow, but I also think what I have realized is unlike some of the jobs I've had in the past, there's never going to be a point where I can sort of sit back on autopilot. Like, there's just no room for that in tech. Yeah. Everything is always moving and changing, and you have to sort of stay on top of what it is that other folks are doing and what the newest technologies are and the good and the bad and the ugly, right? And so it's good. It's good. I'm adjusting. I think the adjustment is different than I thought it was going to be. And I'm still trying to like mentally wrap my head around that.
It is and I've been in tech since I was 20, right? So I started pretty much, my first professional job was in technology, but it is so interesting that you put it that way because every problem you uncover, you've solved a problem, but then you've opened up 3 other either problems or things you need to figure out, or not even problems, ways to advance. You're like, oh, I can do this. Now, how can I take it to this level? Oh, now how can I take it to this level? And so, you're right. It's not like you ever check something off and like, I'm good, I'm done with it. The other thing is with how quickly, and especially with AI, I think this will make sense and you can elaborate on it, but how quickly AI is moving. So I might learn something last week, and by this week it's irrelevant because a newer model or newer things came out. So, and tech's always been like that. You go from operating systems that constantly you're at the next operating system to the next one to the next one, and phone systems or whatever, cybersecurity, whatever it is. Now we're at this even rapidly advancing technology that in 1 year from now we're going to be having a different conversation than we're having now, right?
Absolutely. And it's not to belittle any other industry. So like the reality is you could be drinking from the fire hose in any job that you're in. True. Everyone is evolving. So I don't want that to sort of be the takeaway is like tech is the only one that's evolving. Everyone's evolving. There's always something to learn no matter what you're doing. I think the nuance is what you're saying. It's just like the rate of growth and advancement in tech is tenfold to any other industry I've ever seen. It's just the way that people are constantly sort of exploring how to make something better and making breakthroughs and collaborating, right? When you think about platforms like Hugging Face or GitHub or whatever it is, right? Like people are sharing what they're learning as they're learning it. And so, like you don't have to wait for some sort of white paper to be published from academia. It's like instantaneously you are learning with everyone else. And so Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to do the best that I can, and I think we all are.
Yeah.
But it does get really challenging because the other thing that you have to sort of balance, especially in a role like mine, is while the industry is moving really fast, mass adoption is not.
Yep.
Mass adoption is moving very slow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's always been the case for tech. I just haven't been on this side before, right?
Yeah.
It's like everybody is hearing about AI, but everybody doesn't necessarily know what that means. And I think every person, I mean, this is a stretch because definitely there are exceptions, but I would say most people in the developing world, in the developed world, have access to AI and have had access to AI for years. They just didn't recognize it as AI. And so as I'm having these conversations in my job, we are trying to keep up with like, what is the latest and greatest? But then when we're talking to customers or when I'm talking to family and friends, I have to remember that the stuff I'm talking about every day is really new to them. Even the most basic of concepts is very new to them. And it's not going to be regular mainstream conversation for a little bit. Like it takes a while for the market to catch up. And like ChatGPT was so disruptive because it caught on so quickly. I forget what the time frame was, but you know, like they got up to 1 million users way faster than any other sort of application ever had. And so I will say like the adoption in that sense has been really rapid, but adoption doesn't equate to understanding.
Yep.
Just because you use something doesn't mean you understand how it works. And I think the average person, when you say AI to them, they sort of think of it as like this magical black box. And like they don't understand that it is artificial intelligence. It has been trained on something the same way you would train the human brain on something. And so that is something that I've like been really challenged to balance is like stay ahead, stay up to date in the conversations at work. But just remember when we are creating solutions to take to market, you can't be on this end of the spectrum. You have to meet people where they are.
Yeah. And it is such a spectrum. And you look at, not really looking at, but I think it's interesting that a lot of the conversations I've had, especially since like November and January, have looked at AI as ChatGPT or the Terminator. And there's no, there's no middle ground as to what it is. It's just either, okay, like I type in text and it's like I'm talking to a human. It's like an advanced Google almost like that, like giving me information, or it's the Terminator and I'm absolutely scared of it. And I think we'll start evolving over time. I think as this technology gets more used and more understood. The other thing is, you mentioned another thing about academia. Academia is not driving, in a sense, innovation in this particular technology. I'm not saying completely, because academia, especially if you look in healthcare and things like that, what they've been using AI for, and you mentioned AI has been used for a while, psychology, things like that, for analytics, for studies, things like that, it's been used for quite a while. But in business use case, it's not even the people who have been in technology forever. And it's bringing in a new wave of technologists that are thinking about technology differently, who have had access to technology their whole life. Right. I mean, I started with a rotary dial phone. Right. So when I started calling on a phone, is like just a couple of years before we got the button press. So I adapted and adopted into technology, but we have this new wave and this new generation that has been in technology the whole time. And these flows and this understanding, it makes more sense to them. And I'm meeting more, like I would say, from a younger generation, absolutely brilliant people like yourself and other programmers who have this new perception, this new way of thinking, but the generation of it does seem to be a younger generation that seems to be making, in my mind, some pretty big impacts into that world. Have you seen any? I know you're a younger generation than me. Have you seen anything like that?
Absolutely. I think young people also aren't afraid to play, right? So I might I'm always trying to like simplify everything as much as I can because that's part of my job. But like if I think of it like gymnastics, okay? So if you look at the world's top gymnastics, they are all fairly young. As of the recent gymnastics, like at the Olympics, we're skewing a bit older than normal. But historically speaking, gymnastics is for young people. It's for teenagers. It's for preteens. But the idea in my mind is that when you're young, you're fearless, right? you go after these things. Like, you don't think about the repercussions of if you misstep, you could break your hip, you could break your neck. Like, that's not the first thing in your mind. As you get older and you get more experience, you're like, oh my God, there are so many things that could go wrong. I'm definitely not going to do that. And I think we approach tech in the same kind of way. So as you get older, you see the repercussions of if you were to try something, what the impacts would be on your business or on the market or on society or whatever it is, depending on what kind of industry or company you work in. But I think young people are not afraid to test things. And I think what we forget is you can test this technology without, breaking the system or without going into production. There are little things that you can do behind the scenes to sort of test the technology, even with dummy data. You don't even need real data. Use artificial intelligence to come up with a data set that is made up, right? Yeah. So no harm, no foul. And I think young people are always really interested to sort of tinker in that kind of way and sort of like push the edge and see what's possible. Yep. And so I think that's why we see a lot of innovation in all the spaces, not just tech, coming from young people, because the naivete that they bring becomes their advantage. Like, they don't know any better. And so, like, sometimes people are like, well, we've already tried that. And it's like, okay, well, things have changed since you tried it the last time, so maybe try it again. Whereas a young person doesn't even know we've tried that before. So they're going to go after it because they just don't know any different. And because things have changed, maybe it works differently. So I do think that there is a lot of disruption coming from the younger generations who also are just tech savvy by experience. They've grown up with technology. So it's interesting to them in that it's just the way of life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's when you mentioned that. So when I took over an IT department when I was 21 years old. So I was super young. And I remember the owner of the company, it was an international printing company. And I was doing one of my one-on-ones with him. He goes, you know what I like about you? You don't know what you shouldn't be able to do. And it's that same thing. Is like, I thought I could do everything. And now looking back, I should have shut up more and listened more, some things like that for my youth. But it's so interesting you talk about that, because when you're younger, you don't know what you can't do. And in fact, you have this blind idea of what you can do, but that's a good thing because it helps you push into things instead of from a point of fear. You're pushing at a point of like, hey, I can do this. I can crack this code. And I think in some aspects that hasn't left. And in other aspects, I'm a lot more cautious with how I approach life. Like, I wouldn't even dare do a cartwheel right now. Like, when you talk about gymnastics, I'm positive I'd break my neck with just a cartwheel. So I've got to be careful with that. Okay. So philosophical question. I always like asking this. It's around, Elon Musk, the Neuralink, and embedding a chip in your head. I always get asked, like, what would your superpower be? Or not always, like, you get asked, like, what would your favorite superpower? Mine would be to speak every single language. And in my mind, I'm like, maybe if I could embed a chip and speak every single language, I might do it. And the way I compare it is, and we'll get into your opinion on it, but almost like in athletics and in bodybuilding, steroids. There's people who are not going to take the risk for steroids because they know from a health standpoint it's going to hurt them, it's going to ruin your body, you're going to have liver, heart, all these other problems. But there's other people who are like, well, to achieve this, I'm willing to take on the risk. So that's more my comparison. But like, where do you fall on that? Would you embed a chip if it made you like the most super intelligent being and you could speak every language?
Maybe, but I might argue that we don't have to. So, like, my phone is sitting right here. This is it. So, and the reason that I say that is because I am guilty of not being able to go anywhere without my phone. Right. Like, except maybe the shower, right? But like everywhere else, the phone comes. And so you don't need to embed a chip, because if you have tracking, everyone has tracking on their phone, whether you like it or not. Like, people know where you are. People know what you're purchasing. People know what you're doing, right? And so I don't even think the chip is necessary because, okay, so we're in 2024. I went to South by Southwest in Austin in 2014, and they were talking about embeddables. So the idea was you embed this chip into your body, wherever, so that companies can track you. So I remember the example that they gave is you would be standing on a street corner and the local bus system could understand your location. And when the bus passes by you at that location, it would change the ad on the side of the bus based on your preferences. you don't even need a chip in your body to do that, because when I'm standing on the corner, the phone is in my pocket.
That's true. It already does it almost.
Yeah. So I would say, like, at this point, I probably wouldn't be willing to do it because my phone already serves that purpose. But I think, I don't know. I think it also depends on culture. So going back to psychology, like, is everybody getting chips embedded in them? And like, what are the pros and the cons? I need more data.
Yeah.
What are the pros and the cons?
And then it also levels, if everyone was super intelligent with the chip in their head, then all of a sudden it takes away our differentiators, right? In some way, because then now we're all having the same conversation that's being fed to us, not with our, there's all, and then from the cybersecurity standpoint, if someone were able to hack my brain, do a DDoS attack or something in my brain, and I just start drooling and, like pass out, stuff like that, it'd be, definitely be kind of scary. So, okay. So last thoughts to you, last thoughts on AI, how to get a hold of Boomi, like anything else you want to add, go ahead and you get to take it home.
I think my last thoughts are related to what you were just saying about sort of like if I put the chip in and somebody could hack my brain, and then you sort of like go down this spiral towards the worst, right? And I think it's important that we do consider that there are consequences to the things that we do, but I might invite people to take a second to stay optimistic and think about all the possibilities if we were able to really harness AI and use it for good. So my ideal state in the future would be that the 4-day work week is not even a question. Like if AI is doing all the grunt work for us, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to get through the work week in 4 days or less, right? It's like, instead of thinking about it as taking away jobs, I think of it as making everyone's job less work. And so I think of it as more as like for the greater good, as opposed to trying to harm some portion of society, right? It's just that education has to catch up, because we have to be able to help our young people and our old people. We have to help everybody be prepared for these future jobs that are going to be more critical thinking, more creativity based. So I think that is sort of how I am framing what the future looks like. Yep. If people would like to learn more about Boomi, Boom as in Mary, Boomi.com. You can find us official Boomi on all the social media platforms. You can find me, Patricia Moore, on social media or on LinkedIn. I invite people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's how you and I got connected. But it's such an interesting conversation. And I think the last thing I would say is, like, I'd invite people to sort of tap into their childlike curiosity and start to play with stuff. So like, if you haven't tried ChatGPT, do that. If you have tried ChatGPT, I might invite you to try something else. Maybe try Perplexity, right? Like there's so many different things out there that you could be playing with. And I think it's important for all of us, even if we don't work in tech, to at least try some of these things and try to understand some of the terminology, because like you said, a year from now, things are going to look really different. And we don't want everybody to be left behind. Like we want everybody to be on the train. Yep. So.
Awesome. Patricia, it's been a fun conversation. You are very well spoken. You articulate well. And I just appreciate you jumping on with me, taking some time. I appreciate you letting us go live. If my volume's low, eventually it's going to be fixed. So anyone listening, if my volume's low, I'm trying to fix it, but I can't fix it until I listen to it. I should probably do a different test. But anyhow, Patricia, thank you so much. You have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. This has been really fun. Thanks for inviting me.